Well, another American has died in the war in Ukraine. Multiple reports say former Green Beret Nicholas Mamer was killed while helping provide humanitarian aid to those in Bakhmut, where the ground fighting is at the heaviest. 45 years old, a retired Army Staff Sergeant, he had reportedly been working with the nonprofit group AFG Free. There was initial speculation about his death after the head of the Wagner Group showed a video that he had been killed. It is believed he died from a Russian artillery attack. In a statement, AFG Free described Mamer as a humble, compassionate man that carried out the Special Forces motto, "Free the Oppressed." Nick was a humanitarian at heart. It is believed that at least a dozen Americans have been killed so far in this war. It is dangerous and it is risky, but they still go. Joining me now, Paul Rieckhoff, national security and political analyst and a U.S. Army veteran. He's also the host of the podcast Independent Americans. His latest conversation is with journalist Tim Mak, who has been living in Ukraine and covering the war on the ground there. Paul, talk about the desire of Americans, particularly of our American vets and military, to go into this war zone and aid Ukraine right now, despite the dangers.
Marnie, I think it's one of the most underreported parts of this entire conflict. A generation of people around the world, and many American veterans, feel this is the fight of our time. It's a fight for freedom. It's a fight to protect children and women. It's a chance to serve as a barrier against Putin and oppression throughout the globe. So it really represents a lot of what we joined the American military to sign up for. And I think what you saw with this Special Forces soldier, Nick, is that he died as he lived, serving his country, serving his community, serving others, and trying to put his skills to work in the toughest places on the planet to help others. And I think many of us in the veterans community consider this fight in Ukraine the extension of our service as global citizens, as Americans who stand with the good guys and in opposition to the bad guys. And there's dozens of them, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, that are serving in a variety of ways, not just in the military, but also as journalists, as humanitarians, within our State Department. And it's a really underreported part of this story.
Yeah, noble and brave in what they're doing. I want to talk about some of the victories on the battlefield, so to speak, with Ukraine lately, and maybe the most is their ability to shoot down some of these Russian rockets that were headed into the capital city of Kyiv. How big of a blow is this to Putin's war effort?
I think it's critical. It's what we've been talking about for months. I mean, the Ukrainians need a way to protect their skies, most of all so they can protect their civilians. And in my podcast this week, I talked to Tim Mak, who's also a U.S. Army veteran. He's now a journalist, and he talks about what it's like to be in Kyiv as these rockets are going overhead. He's posting audio, he's posting video to try to bring Americans and folks around the world closer to what it's like. And in the last couple of days and even hours, it looks like the Russians have waged a number of significant missile attacks, and they haven't landed. They haven't really made significant damage on civilians and on targets, and I think that has to do with the increase in air assets and an increase in the American Patriot missiles and other weapon systems that have come online. And that barrier overhead will extend to the Ukrainian troops in Bakhmut and in the West and whatever kind of advance they have during this counteroffensive in the next couple of weeks and months and maybe even years.
And what does he say about the momentum on the ground, on the battlefield?
You know, I think he says that the Ukrainians are tough and they've dug in. We know that this is a stalemate right now in Bakhmut, but he also talks about the resiliency of the Ukrainian people. He talks about what it's like in Kyiv, where there are still people going to school and going to bars and going to restaurants, and they're trying to manage life as though it's normal, in part so they can show that Ukrainians can survive and that society can go on. They're obviously supporting their forces in the West, but they're trying to keep their society going. And they're trying to show that Kyiv can be a model to the rest of the world of resilience and toughness and freedom and openness. Kyiv's a very open, modern place. And I think that's a part of this story that's also underreported. There is a civilian society there that's not directly in conflict every day, but has the threat of violence every single day. And that is significant, especially for children.
Yeah, living in a war zone, trying to go to work or go to school. How do you explain this to kids? I don't envy the position they're in. This is a small thing, but worth mentioning. There have been some arrests internally in Ukraine for sharing videos and locations of some of the weaponry. There are concerns around that for obvious reason. That's rare, but is it something that does happen in battle, that you find people who are giving too much away, sharing secrets?
Yeah, frankly, it's what happens with young people. I mean, imagine, hundreds of thousands of teenagers and folks in their 20s who have access to social media, who have access to email and text and SMS. They can throw stuff all over the place. So this is a concern for every modern military, every modern government. We saw that here in the U.S. with the recent intelligence leak, that we have to be exceptionally vigilant about protecting our sensitive information, our top secret information, and not disclosing anything that could prove as an advantage to the enemy. So I think Putin similarly is going to have this problem. The oppression there is much stronger, but he's also got an entire population within Russia that might get an interest in sharing information, or might just get sloppy and accidentally share something with someone else overseas or even in the U.S. And I know our intelligence networks in particular are really focused on trying to mine that data to get that content and provide any advantage we can to NATO and the West.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, right? This is a new age of warfare that none of us have ever seen, with technology and social media and the access to it. In the early days of the war, the good thing was we were able to see what was going on. It was a window to the world about what was happening in Ukraine. The bad side of that is too much gets shared too quickly, and there's so much misinformation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially now when you can geo-target from your laptop. So if someone, looks out their window and says, "Oh, look at that Patriot missile system outside my window," and post that on social media, the Russians can see that too. And they can try to align their missile attacks or their strikes based off that. So it requires tremendous vigilance. The old saying in World War II is that loose lips sink ships. And there was a big push to ensure that people kept things confidential when they were writing letters home. This is the modern extension of that. Everyone's got to be vigilant in what they share. In the same way you wouldn't put your password up on the screen on TV or share it on social media, folks in Ukraine have to be careful about weapon systems, tactics, and any other kind of operational information.
Always a pleasure. Paul Rieckhoff, thank you.
Thank you, Marnie.